Doesn't look like Jason is on yet. Lon Lott,
Lon Lott, present.
Greg Gordon,
Greg Gordon, present.
Jessica Smewen.
Jessica Smewen, present.
Okay, and we'd also like to welcome our police chief, Brian Gwilliam, and our fire chief, Reed Thompson. And I see Ryan and Don Bingham on the as well.
Thanks for having us.
Pardon me?
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Welcome to our meeting. We have an opening prayer by Greg Gordon. Greg?
Sure. Our dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful unto thee for the blessings of democracy and our opportunities to serve and work together and strive to help and improve our communities. We thank thee for all that thou hast done for us. We pray that thy spirit may abide with us in this meeting and guide us in our decision-making and actions and words. Please help us in all that we do and bless and watch over our families. We so pray in gratitude, especially for the moisture that we've received, and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Greg. I also like to welcome Hiram, our city attorney, and Bonnie, our city recorder, to our meeting. Let's move on to the consent calendar. I'm sorry, I should say we're skipping the pledge again tonight. It's difficult to do without a live group. We'll move on to the consent calendar now. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar or any questions on it?
Yeah, Mayor, I had a question on the new truck too that probably Shane can help answer. One, I was wondering what the intended usage, what that was planned to be for, for what and by whom. And second, I noticed on there it looks like it's a hot red color, and I just wanted to confirm that's what the city wanted.
That last question, I had the same question myself, and I called and they said, "Oh no, I clicked the wrong button." So it will be white. This would be our main Parks truck that Cal would drive. His truck, we just plan to shift it down and sell an older one and use it as kind of a secondary truck. So there is going to be a truck come up for sale here very soon. So we've actually been trying to find this truck since the end of August. In fact, I had this truck found up in Layton. Want to make for sure after seeing the Red Hawk comment that had everything that we were looking for and nothing more or less. I said, "Can I come up and look at it?" He said, "Yeah." I drive clear up there. He comes out and he's like, "Oh, somebody sold it." So, but they have 6 more that are supposed to be here in 30 days. And he said, if you can get it approved and get a PO, we'll make sure that your name's on one of those. So,
yeah. Got it. Thanks. And by the way, I was going to mention this last time. The general sales manager at Ken Gar Ford is, lives in Alpine, and he's, very helpful. And so, if we need him to try to locate a truck or something, I realize this one's another make, but that's always an option.
Well, I'd like to just point out that there's nothing wrong with a nice red truck. There are worse colors to pick. I mean, you can white block you on a red truck or a red block you on a white truck. I'm okay either way.
Yes, good catch, Greg. I did catch that as well, and I just didn't have him reprint it, but it is white. So, yeah.
I'd like to welcome Jason Thielen to the meeting. Let the roll reflect that Jason joined us. So we have a full quorum tonight. Okay, any further discussion on the
I have a couple of changes in the minutes that I wasn't able to get to Bonnie. On page 1, line 33, it says, asked about the gates on Willow Drive. I think it's Moyle Drive. Should be Moyle Drive. Carla was in that discussion. It says Willow Drive. It should be changed to Moyle Drive.
Correct.
And then on page 4, line 29, it should say repair to the contractor doing the new water line, not to the property owner. Bonnie, did you get that?
Yeah, I got both of those.
Okay. Okay, with those two modifications, unless others have anything for the minutes, I'd make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you, Lon. Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll make a second with the addition that to what he said on page 10, my name is in there on voting and I wasn't there, so just remove my name on page 10. I'll make that motion.
Did you get that, Bonnie?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so we have a motion to pass by Lon Lott and seconded by Jason Thielen. Any further question on the motion? All in favor, beginning with Jason?
Aye.
Lon?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay. I believe I saw a last minute email with some comments for public comment. Austin, did I see correctly? Oh,
Here we go. I'm unmuted. Sorry, I was muted. So the comments are actually from one of our items that's on the agenda tonight. So the accessory building setback exceptions.
okay.
The emails who are on our Zoom call here, they're the ones who sent that email.
Okay, great. So we'll need to wait until we get to that point of the meeting, since it is on the agenda. Are there any other public comments or questions? Nothing? Awesome.
Yeah, I don't see anything. No, that was the only comment that we had.
Okay, great. Then we'll move along to reports and presentations. Shane, did you want to take a minute to discuss the budget calendar?
Yeah, I just put this together. And there could be a few changes here or there, but just so the council kind of know what to expect. Some of these are hard dates, like the tentative budget and the final budget approvals. In blue would be Alpine City kind of events or dates. The red are dates for Lone Peak's Public Safety District, just showing that their adoption of their tentative budget would precede ours, and the same with their final. And so we'll be bringing more information. If you have ideas, of things that you'd like to accomplish this year, feel free to shoot them over to me, or come in and talk to me, or however you would like to do that. And then we'll start talking about these in future city council meetings.
Okay, great. Anything else on that topic, Shane?
I don't think so, not unless there's questions.
Any questions for Shane on the budget or the process? Okay. Without any further questions, we'll move on to our action items. The first one is a nomination for Planning Commission. This is one that I've been doing some work on recently, and spoken with Jane Greiner about retaining her post on the Planning Commission, as opposed to stepping down and having somebody else nominated. Jane has agreed to stay on with the approval of the council, and so I would like to put Jane Greiner's name out there as a recommendation for continuation on Planning Commission, and welcome any questions regarding that nomination.
Hey, Mayor, question is, would it be a 1 year or a 2 year or 4 year, expectation of?
Good question, Greg. We used to have a mixture of terms on the planning commission. But we voted, I don't know when that was, Shane, that we took that vote, but we standardized each of the positions to a 4-year term. And so they are staggered, but they are all 4 years. So this would be another 4-year term. And Jane is currently serving as our chair for those of you who don't know online. So she would continue to be the chair unless otherwise decided by the commission.
Yeah, and on the chair, they're actually supposed to vote in January of each year. I think it's each year. And that was kind of postponed pending this planning commission appointment. So,
Right.
yeah.
Jane's been doing a great job as the chair, and I'd like to see her stay on. She also has a lot of history with the city, and is one of the more tenured members of the commission.
Mayor, I got to correct myself. The chair, it's every 2 years.
Okay, and so she's got another year if she stays on.
Well, her term is up right now, and so if she was voted as chair, it would be 2 years from now.
Okay, but I believe she was, and I know this can be settled outside this meeting, but I thought that she was named chair last year. Does that position automatically end because the term comes to a close and she has to be re-elected as chair? Or
The way it works, so Mayor, if I may, the way it works.
Austin, you muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry. The way that it works is the chair is appointed every other year. So on the odd year, so 2021, they have to select a new chair.
Okay.
But she could be, reappointed to the chair position. There's no limit on how many terms you can serve as chair.
And regardless of whether she's the chair or not, the nomination is for another 4-year term. So that's really what we're here to discuss.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions regarding the nomination?
I think Jane brings a lot of experience that is beneficial to the planning commission. So I think it's a good appointment.
Thank you. Yeah, Jane has shown a great level of commitment and interest in the city. I know she's all in, and so I appreciate her efforts. I think she's done a very good job. Any other questions? Without any other questions, if somebody would like to make a motion to accept the nomination, that would be terrific.
I'll make a motion to accept the nomination by the mayor for planning commissioner Jane Greiner.
Thank you, Jason. Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Jason Thielen to accept the nomination of Jane Greiner to fill another 4-year term on the Planning Commission, and that has been seconded by Jessica Smuin. Any further question on the motion? We'll take a vote, beginning with Greg Gordon.
Aye.
Lon Lott.
Aye.
Jessica Smuin.
Aye.
Jason Thielen.
Aye.
Carla Merrill.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. And thank you, Jane, if you're listening in, for being willing to serve for another 4 years. We really appreciate what you're doing. All right. We'll move on to the second action item, Trail Committee nominations. I have 4 people. I actually have 5, but I haven't been able to communicate very well with the 5th nomination that I have. But I would like to put out the names of Will Jones, Breezy Anson, Trent Edwards, and Everett, who has been serving on the Trail Committee for some time now. I'm going to take that back. I have not been able to communicate with Everett in the last few days. So I would like to put those 3 names out there first: Will Jones, Breezy Anson, and Trent Edwards. And would welcome any input or feedback or questions from council.
I missed the last name. It's Will Jones and Breezy Anson. Who's the last one again?
Trent Edwards. Trent has also been working on with trails, and one reason I feel really strongly about those three is I think they've done a terrific job carving out, planning, and then executing the construction of our trails. I think there's a real commitment on their part. There's a lot of creativity. I think the trails that they've created in the past 2 or 3 years have been become outstanding assets to the city, attracting people from out of town, and those of us who live locally get to jump on them whenever we want. I just think they're really doing a great job and have great foresight in what they've done. Any thoughts?
Hey, Mayor, a question. Maybe Austin, you might remember. I'm trying to remember. Does the Trail Committee elect their own chair? Is that how we established that recently?
Yes, I believe that.
Yeah, I have that ordinance open right
have it
now in
here?
front of me, Austin, and that is correct.
Yeah. So we'll want to wait until we get a full committee before they elect a chair, but I should have those other 2 names confirmed. The 2 people that I would like to serve. I just haven't got an answer back yet.
It actually takes it a step further. It says the members of the committee shall appoint one of the members as chairperson, subject to being ratified by the city council. And that person would serve for a term of 1 year, and then that term could be renewed. Also, just of note, the ordinance suggests staggered terms of 3 years. So initially, you'd probably have maybe a couple of 3-year terms, a couple of 2-year terms, and a 1-year term. And then that would stagger things out so they're not all coming up on the same year.
Yeah. So we'll have to determine which of those terms belongs to each individual. It sure makes it hard to track, though, when you have mixed terms like that.
Yeah, and on that note, Craig made a suggestion, and he's not here tonight. He had another commitment, but Hiram's here. But he suggested when we make these appointments that we do it by resolution, and in that resolution, it would specifically spell out who has each term, and the same with planning commission terms. So you don't have to go back and dig through minutes to try to figure it out. And so that's the way this ordinance that's in the packet tonight is set up. We will have to go in and insert those names and who is, up for each term. But that will help us track that.
So Shane, one of the things I have not done in the process of making these nominations, I haven't talked to the individuals about the length of term, because I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's a conversation we're going to have. So
Yeah.
Vote to continue this to the next meeting so that we will have a chance to do that.
Yeah.
So we happy to discuss the item further, but I would recommend that we make that motion to continue this to the next meeting so that we can have a more detailed definition on length of term per nominee.
Hey, Mayor, I'll make a motion that we table resolution number 2021 the appointment for Trail Committee, and have that resolution clearly identify the different term dates so that we can then insert the appropriate names into those dates.
Okay.
During that time, you will contact the 3 that have accepted the assignment to see what their term expectations are, as well as you can find the other 2 that you're looking for.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a motion by Lon Lott. Do we have a second to that motion to table?
I'll second.
Greg Gordon, I heard a second. So we have a motion by Lon, seconded by Greg. Before we take a vote on the motion, I'll just add one more piece of this. What I would like to do is call upon a city council member and a planning commission member to act as liaisons to the trail committee. They wouldn't be voting members, but they would have the ability to provide input and answer questions for the committee so that they don't have to wait. My fear is that we have a committee that comes up with a plan and then they've got to wait for the next city council meeting to come up with an opinion on that plan and then go back to working on the same project. It'd be great to have somebody who could act as that liaison in the meetings. So I'll talk to individuals on what to do. I have some ideas on who I'd like to do or who I'd like to have fill those positions. I don't know if Ed is listening in, but I think Ed Bush would be a great member of the Planning Commission to serve in that capacity. So we'll come back in the next meeting with that. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Any further question on the motion to table?
Yeah. A little further discussion. Shane, was I clear on how to print that resolution out? That
Yes.
we have a line item for each of the individuals?
Yes.
And then were we limiting this to 5 members?
The ordinance says the committee shall be comprised of 5 members.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would suggest you have 5 slots on that resolution so that we can, when they leave or whatever, we know just which slot we're replacing every time.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we'll take a vote on the motion, beginning with Carla.
Aye.
Greg Gordon,
Aye.
Lon Lott,
Aye.
Jason Thielen,
Yes.
and Jessica Smeon.
Aye.
Okay, motion to table passes. We'll talk about this in our next meeting. I think we're just about there. I just want to make sure I'm contacting those last 2 candidates in a timely fashion. All right, we're going to move on to, sorry, my phone keeps wanting to turn off, and that's what I've got to look at our agenda. Accessory buildings. Austin, would you like to introduce that topic?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this item is, we're looking at accessory building setback exceptions. So the Planning Commission during public comment about a month ago was contacted, or the Bingham, Cushing, and Strong families made a proposal to make a change to our ordinance. So what you see here on the screen is what our existing ordinance is regarding accessory buildings, specifically the setbacks. So we require a 15-foot rear setback and a 10-foot side setback. However, we do have a criteria that you can get an exception to those setbacks if you can meet 6 criteria, which are outlined here. So the first one is that you have to be at least 12 feet away from any dwelling, either on your lot or your neighbor's lot. The second one is you can have no openings onto your, so windows or doors, no openings on the side of the building that looks onto your neighbor's lot. The third item is your roof cannot drain onto your neighbor's property. You'd have to make sure that discharge stays on your property. The fourth item is the building must be constructed out of 1 hour fire rated materials. And then fifth, it cannot be located on a recorded easement. And then finally, the building can be no taller than 10 feet. So that's what our ordinance currently states. I switch here. We have some neighboring cities here that have similar requirements. So for example, American Fork, they have a very similar exception criteria here. They have 5 items. However, you'll note that the main difference is they don't have an item that talks about height. So they don't really, height is not an issue for them, but they do allow you to put an item inside their setback, which is 5 feet, if you can meet these 5 criteria. So very similar to what we do in Alpine. The city of Highland, they have an ordinance that, so their ordinance is a little bit more complicated because they define buildings and structures as 2 different things. So a building, if it's under 200 square feet, doesn't have to meet any of the building requirements. However, it would have to meet their structure requirements, which they say no structure shall be closer than 10 feet from either the side lot line or the rear lot line, and actually 30 feet from the rear lot line. And they do allow up to 25 feet, but again, that's within 10 feet of the property line. And I spoke with their city planner, and they said the reason why they did it that way was so that they would never have a structure built on a public utility easement. And then Lehigh, they're probably the least restrictive. They have a 16-inch setback for side yards. And they say, however, they do have one caveat that a structure cannot be located on a public utility easement. And then 16 feet from the rear property line as well. So that's both side and rear. And they do allow you to go up to 24 feet in height. So, you can have a pretty tall structure within, a foot and, less than 1.5 feet from the property line. So least restricted.
Austin, quick question there. Did you say 16 feet? I think it says 16 inches on there.
I may have mispronounced. Yeah, I may have misspoke.
It's feet though. Got it. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, 16 inches.
I heard that too, Greg. Good catch. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for catching that. I apologize. Yeah. So yeah, 16 inches, so less than 1.5 feet. So those are kind of what we're looking at as far as what is our city ordinance, what are neighboring ordinances. So the Bingham, Cushing, and Strong families, they've actually put together a proposal that they feel, they feel like there's some improvements that can be made to our ordinance. And so they put together this, and this was in your packet. However, just before the meeting tonight, just before the 5 o'clock deadline, they submitted an updated version of this. So that's what we're seeing here on the screen. I did forward that to you. So the email that you referred to at the beginning of the meeting, Mayor, that email has their comments, as well as if you look in the attachment, you'll find the most recent version of this, of their proposal, their slideshow here that they have. So, and so we'll give them an opportunity to speak, but I guess I'll just kind of glaze over this and then they can add more details. But essentially what they're proposing is that we change our ordinance to allow for a structure to be up to 12 feet, 6 inches inside the setback area. And they feel like it's, with regards to some of our requirements, like you can't be on a public utility easement, their proposal is, as long as the structure could be moved, they don't see that would be a major obstacle. It's not like you're pouring a foundation. If it's just on a concrete pad, they feel like the building wouldn't be a hindrance in the public utility easement. So that's kind of a summary of it. Ryan, if you're I guess I'll let them have an opportunity to speak, or you can determine how you want to do this, Mayor. But that's kind of the gist of what they're asking for tonight. So.
Okay, I'm sure council has a lot of input on this item, but we can go ahead and turn time over to the applicants and see what they would like us to know before we have that discussion.
Great. Hey, thank you again for allowing us. Dawn actually is going to be the voice for us tonight. And so want to give her some time with that.
Thanks for that overview, Austin. That was perfect. So kind of what happened is a few of us received citations for not being in compliance with code with our sheds that we built close to our fence lines unknowingly. It's something that we were very ignorant of, and we take responsibility for that. And so in looking at coming up to code once we received those violations, we started, mentioning to neighbors, make sure you don't build your sheds. There's the code and you need to look it up before you build your sheds. And as we started mentioning this to people around Alpine, we started getting comments of, oh, my neighbor has a shed right on our fence line that's taller than that. And, oh, well, I want to build a shed that's taller than 10 feet. I want to build a 12-foot shed. So that's not allowed if it's, within 15 feet of my back fence. And so as we started talking to people, we thought, well, maybe there might be room for some consideration. Maybe this isn't just a problem for a few of us. Maybe this is something that more than of the city wants. And so we talked to the shed companies, and if you're not buying a shed from Lowe's, if you're doing anything at all custom, their standard, Wright's Shed Company has built quite a few sheds in Alpine. I don't have a number from them. They said it could be, over 100 sheds that they've built in the city. But they said their standard is between about 11 and 13 feet. So we saw that, and then we just did a little drive around the city and just saw that there were quite a few that really seemed to be in our same situation, where it would be above 10 feet, but not probably over 13 feet. So kind of this area that we're asking for you guys to look at. So on that height, there was a drawing that the Planning Commission had, and when we emailed you all, so you probably have all seen this, but there was a drawing on angles that the Planning Commission had submitted.
Austin, do you mind pulling that up? It was just not one of those pages.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. Here we go.
So what they found, and we were looking at this bottom left corner, is that currently allowed is a 20-foot shed set 10 feet off, set on the setback, right, is allowed. And so they drew an angle from that. And Austin, I don't know if you're the one that drew this, but so that's that angle. And then they put a 10-foot shed within the setbacks, which is allowed right now, and showed that angle of how that would affect your neighbor's view from their home. And then they went ahead and put a 13-foot shed, which is what we were proposing originally. And they said, hey, if you put a 13-foot shed, you're going to have to set it back 8 more inches in order to not block any more view than what's already allowed. And so that was our reason for the change tonight of 13 feet to 12.5 feet, is that if we're going to propose this, we don't want to make any infringements on any neighbor's views any more than what is already allowed in the code. So, and then in looking in the neighboring cities, we thought it was interesting that in American Fork, Austin's already gone over this, but the wording is identical, except the piece that we're proposing, that number 6 bullet, is height restrictions is not included in American Fork, so they have no height restriction. In Highland, we're under 200 square feet on our shed, and so in Highland, I called and talked to them as well, and they said there wouldn't be any setbacks for under 200 square feet. There's just the utility easement issue. And then in Lehigh, the 16 inches, which we are past the 16 inches by far. So we found that in 3 neighboring cities, our shed would potentially be allowed. And I mean, the bottom line that we kind of came to is, and the reason we're bringing it here is not just because we had a problem with a violation and we want you to change it for our 3 homes. When we looked at it and when we talked to neighbors, and again, not just in our neighborhoods here, not just with the people we go to church with, but talking to people over on the East Bench and driving around, we found that 100% of the people we talked to said, I would like this changed, and it's not a concern for me personally on my views. This is something that I would like changed. And so we thought, well, if it doesn't change any, view obstructions from what's already allowed with a 20-foot setback, 10 feet, why wouldn't we consider changing this? I think is kind of what it came down to on the height issue. So anything else?
And I would say, and the other thing, and I feel for each of you that are on today, is that understanding the code, and so outside of just hoping to make this minor modification, which we feel would be a great benefit to the city as a whole, especially where we've seen so many that are potentially out of compliance, is that just making the process easier and more understandable for people like us as well as contractors to know some of these codes. And once again, we were ignorant and didn't do enough research on our end. But outside of just potentially making a code change, but making it so that the others that are whether it's the contractors, the landscapers, residents, are better understand better the different codes and things like this, so that they can avoid some of these issues. And that would really be part of our proposal is to find a way, and we're happy to give some suggestions as well. But yeah, we appreciate the time and consideration, and Austin, you've been great in helping facilitate a lot of this. And so yeah, I guess with that, if there's any questions, for us, we're happy to help with anything that we've done, but that's it.
Thank you. Of course, we do have, there was a motion made on the Planning Commission to deny, which passed, I believe, correct, Austin? By a
Yes,
5-2
yeah.
vote.
Yeah, 5-2 vote.
Okay. Do we have, I can't see right now. Do we have a member of the Planning Commission that would like to make any comments?
Let's see, Jane was, I don't know if Jane made it to the meeting.
I would like to hear from the Planning Commission if someone is present. Oh, there I can see the tiles. I don't see anybody here. Okay, Austin, you were in the Planning meeting. What should we know?
So let me just clarify, first of all, that I was actually not at that meeting. I was out of town, but I'll do my best to kind of summarize what it was explained to me secondhand. Essentially, the Planning Commission, their issue with it was, they raised a couple of points. One was, if you go to Home Depot, you'll find that most of the tough sheds are under 10, they're 10 feet or under. It's really when you start getting into like custom built, which is what we're looking at here, that you start to get taller. And so the original ordinance, they felt the original ordinance, the reason why it was created the way it was is because the idea was you could go and buy a tough shed and put it on the corner of your property, or to have a little lawnmower shed. That was kind of the idea behind it. And so the Planning Commission, felt like that there was a reason why they made that decision when they created that ordinance. The other issues that were raised with this was the fact that the structures are in an easement, so public utility easement. And so, looking at Lehigh, looking at American Fork, Highland, they all, they may have less restrictive requirements than Alpine City in many regards. However, all of those cities don't allow a structure to be built in a public utility easement. And so in this situation, these structures are located in a public utility easement. So that was a big reason why they felt like this isn't something that we should change, that they felt like those easements should be free. And so those were kind of some of the big reasons. There's other reasons, more discussion that happened. And again, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you everything that went on in the discussion, but those were kind of the big points that were relayed to me.
Okay, thank you. And from personal standpoint,
Mayor, are we okay to maybe comment on that? Is that all right?
yeah, I wanted to just, I started to say something. From a personal standpoint, I built my own custom shed and I made sure it was under 10 feet. I felt like the ordinance was fair and that it helped protect my neighbors from obstructing their views. I know there's been some valid points brought up about further to allow for higher elevation, that it wouldn't impact the line of sight. But I think our ordinance is a pretty good one as it is. Doesn't mean we can't change it. I just feel like it's served a good purpose up to this point. Yes, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask Austin. So on the utility easement issue, which again, I think is definitely an issue in every city. I think it's separate from this height requirement that we're asking for though. But if it's movable, in Highlands, when I talked to them, they said, you know, we will allow a structure to be sitting on flat work as long as it's movable. If you incur the cost of moving it, when a utility needs to come in and the homeowner understands that we're going to allow that. Is that something that is similar in Alpine?
We kind of have a similar policy in Alpine. So one is that we do allow flat work inside an easement. So, you know, driveway, a patio, whatever, those kind of things are totally fine on an easement. Where we don't, ours doesn't line up with them is we just don't allow structures. And that's found in that exception, you know, the 5th point in there specifically calls that out. And so unfortunately that's where we kind of differ from Highland.
Okay.
And to be fair, I mean, to be honest with you, so the way our ordinance is written, there's probably, I mean, 90% of the properties in Alpine probably couldn't put a structure inside a public or right on the property line because there is a public utility easement. There's only any property that's not in a recorded subdivision would be one where you could put it right up against the property line. But anything that's in a recorded that's in a subdivision would have had a public utility easement because we require it when they record the subdivision.
Okay. We had a neighbor that had emailed you asking about that, and this was probably a year ago. I need to check the date on the email, and you had responded and said, you know, if you hit all the other points and your structure is movable, it can set in within that easement. So that is not allowed in Alpine.
I mean, if it was something that could be moved easily, you know, that might be something that's different. So
yeah,
we would probably take a look at that depending, it would be on a case-by-case basis, right?
Okay,
so
gotcha. Okay, and we just felt like this height from 10 to 12 feet that didn't obstruct any more views is separate from the utility easement, which is definitely another bullet point. So that's a separate bullet point, and that's there in every city. So we were just talking about the height one.
Any questions or comments by council? Jason, Greg?
Yeah. Yeah, Mayor, here's my, I did watch that planning commission discussion. I think there were even a couple of them. And here's my reading on this one. And I actually see all 3 of these sheds from my backyard. I might be the only house that does. It didn't really jump out as being too high or obstructive, you know, as they've come up, and some have been done, you know, I think for over, you know, a year or two. I think the concern may be that there could be, you know, quite a few of these throughout the city that are either on the easement or a little too high. I'm not really personally, you know, in favor of putting in higher structures because that, you know, could impact views and you know, and sight lines and so on. But I think what happened, it looks like on this road, is there's 5 sheds that went in, Right about there. And all 5 of them were incompliant. Like one's been fixed, another is like, kind of a small cottage and will need to be, moved or something. But interestingly, it's 5 out of 5. So I think if we look elsewhere, we're probably going to find, more of the same. And they did not have, I don't think, the same builder, the same timing. So, that's a concern, is that, this could be in a lot of places. So what that makes me think is we could probably do a better job somehow on the webpage or newsletter, or, new builders and owners and home buyers and so on, of kind of pushing out awareness of, the key points where we have kind of issues around sheds, accessory structures, sidewalks, outdoor lighting, fences, so on. Because it seems like that comes up, but then they go do it, they weren't aware. And apparently all 5 of these had no idea, and then, found out later that they were incompliant. So I think that's the concern. So I would favor, an exception here, particularly if you look at the Cushings there, there's a 35-foot home or something, that kind of overshadows this 11-foot shed there next to it. That goes, I don't know what it is, near 100 feet deep or whatever it is, 70 or something. So, that's kind of my view, is I think maybe an exception is appropriate here, accompanied with a change to better make available and increase awareness of what our policy actually is. Anyway, so that's, that's one view on it.
Thank you, Greg. Carla, do you have anything to add?
No, just that, excuse me, I feel, I feel for these people. They didn't know, unwittingly did this, but my mantra is we have these ordinances for a reason, and to change it just because everybody else went against that ordinance isn't a valid reason for me. I feel like not having a structure over a public easement is a good idea. It's quicker, faster access. What if, who knows? But I mean, that's specifically in there. I would think that when they went over it, that, there are cases when they thought that would be valid. As far as things being taller, I'm not for that either. I feel like there's enough of people pushing the edge on the ordinances, and I feel like we need to stick with it. But unless, that's not what we believe in, but I feel like, they came up with that height restriction for a specific reason. It's to protect views. If they are on an extreme slope and they're not affecting anybody's views at all, maybe that's room for an exception. But then again, I'm not a fan of exceptions either. So I don't know. I would say right now, I'm not in favor of changing the ordinance. I like it as it is.
Thank you, Carla. Jessica, do you have anything to add?
I just am looking for a little more clarity. So the request is to change the ordinance from 10 feet to 12 feet, but in doing so, you would also have to have a bigger setback, correct? If you had a 12-foot tall shed, you would be set back further. So there wouldn't be an impedance in views if your setback's further. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think we're talking about inches, not feet in setback. Is that correct? Austin?
So setbacks are done in feet. We don't deal in inches. The proposal was to have their proposal is that they be allowed to have a 12-foot, 6-inch tall building inside the setback. So that means potentially they could have a 0 setback as long as they meet all of the criteria, and they could have a 12-foot, 6-inch structure there as proposed.
Okay, and then my other question is, what about all the other sheds that aren't in compliance? Is everybody being cited?
Jane or Jessica, I can provide some background on that. So, the way that we do the code enforcement is it's on a complaint basis. So the 5 individuals that we have here tonight, there was a complaint filed against them. And so Ted, our code enforcement, went out and investigated it. So it's on a complaint basis. We don't look at old structures that may have been grandfathered in. You know, obviously structures that were built 40 years ago aren't going to meet today's ordinances. And so, you know, we don't look at stuff like that. But recent structures, you know, that were built within, you know, if it was built within a few months ago and they didn't have a permit and we get a complaint, we go and look into something like that. So that's how it's handled, is on a complaint basis.
Okay, and then last question for clarity. So if there isn't a change in the ordinance and an exception is not granted, what's the remedy for these homeowners? What's the next steps for them?
So right now they're actually dealing with code enforcement. And so that process, right now, what Ted has done is he's given them a deadline to bring those structures into compliance, which means they would, you know, either have to adjust the height of it, move it, whatever it takes to make that comply with our current ordinance. If they don't agree with that, they do have the ability to appeal that to our appeal authority. And the appeal authority can hear their case and you know, determine whether or not we made a mistake as far as our code enforcement goes.
Okay, and this brought to mind one other question. So are all of those sheds, because they are sitting in the easements, are they all movable? The ones that have been cited?
I don't know if you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, ours is movable.
Okay. That's it for now, still considering the different options.
And ours was built 1.5 years ago. When we got the violation, it was almost 1.5 years. We have had our home and our yard finished.
Thank you, Jessica. Jason, do you have any questions or thoughts?
A couple questions. When you say movable, can you bring those pictures up of what they are? Some of those?
Yeah, let me pull up those pictures, one moment.
So Austin, do any of these, while you're looking at those, have any of these accessory buildings pulled permits before these structures were erected?
That's a good question. So no, they did not pull a permit. However, it's my understanding that they kind of did their homework on that. So our ordinance says that if you're building a structure that's under 200 square feet, it doesn't have any electricity and it doesn't have any plumbing going to it, you don't have to get a building permit.
Okay.
So I'm looking at these here. I mean, what I'm interested in is the definition of what's movable. Because look at that strong house there. I mean, I guess in some ways you can move anything if you really wanted to, but movable to me is something that could be quickly moved. And I think you were trying to imply that when you talked about some flexibility. I mean, if it's a small little tin thing that you can pick up and move, that's one thing, but these look like really nice sheds that you couldn't move just with a bunch of guys moving it. So that's my only question. So here's a question for you, for clarity point. Austin, they talked about, I forget who mentioned this, maybe it was Greg, but an exception for this. I know that if someone wants to build an accessory building, it's not possible for them to get an exception from the city to build it any closer, you know, than what's allowed in the code. You're not able to get an exception on this, but on those things. But on this one, you say there is in our development code the ability to have an exception granted on this?
Yeah, so let me pull up the ordinance here. 1 second. Okay. So this is our ordinance that says it has to be 15 and 10 feet. And then it goes on to say, except that no minimum or rear side setback shall be required when the following conditions are met. So in essence, this is the exception. If you can meet these 6 criteria, you can have an exception to our 15 and 10 setbacks.
So to answer my question though, Austin, you're not allowed to do any exceptions outside of what is listed at 1 through 6, right?
This is it. There's no outside exceptions besides this.
So by our code, we can't actually say, hey, we're going to give you an exception to these people and leave our code the way it is. We actually have to change our entire code. There's not a way to give an exception, is what I'm trying to say to.
Yeah, it'd have to be a change of ordinance.
It's either change the code or have the resident adjust their building.
Right. So just wanted to point that out because I didn't think that was clear. Another thing to me is I think a lot of thought has went into these heights restrictions in the past, meaning if you can stick it right to the property line and can go up 12.5 feet, that's one thing if you're on a big acre lot with a lot of spaces, but some people, you can do the same thing on quarter acre lots and 10,000 square foot lots. And if you've got a small backyard and you've got a big building right there on the property, that's what we were trying to prevent, is to make it less crowded and it works for all over the city. So I don't think the reason for the height restrictions just has to do with what you could buy at Home Depot, but more along the lines of protecting neighbors, and making sure that you don't encroach on them by going right up to your property line and building a large thing. So that's the only other point I wanted to bring up. But yeah, I think it's a tough thing here because, to the mayor's point, I know people who have built with builders and they've built it to code. It would be nice of them they might want to build it taller, but they built it to code. If you use a builder, I would hope that the builder would think about code related issues too. That's what sometimes you pay them for, but I've worked and I've seen people work within these code. And so I have a hard time just changing them because we have some that built outside that. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Jason. Lon, would you like to offer any comments?
A couple things. Obviously, if we've had issues in the past, we look at ordinances and we modify them, change them to adjust accordingly. Some ordinances in the past have either outdated or not appropriate at this point in the city, but we have been, over the course of many years though, trying to see what the city should look like and create those ordinances accordingly. And as we've moved along with creating these ordinances, yes, we have looked at other cities to see what their ordinance says, but it's not a requirement that we compare ourselves to someone else when we create those ordinances, but what we want to look like and what we want things to feel like. So I appreciate the different other cities' ordinances and the way they look. But I think over the course of years, we have looked at this accessory building as Marla has put it, a real step to accommodate someone who wants to put a mower or something, some kind of storage on their lot that they don't have to meet all the other ordinances that we have of 20-foot setback and things like that. This was just one of those ordinances we've created that allows someone to meet those criteria and then get a little shed in their backyard. So we did, to Jason's point, have spent a lot of time over the years in making some of these ordinances to reflect what we want things to look like, and there was a reason for a small shed. You get on some of these smaller lots, the quarter acre lots in downtown, and it's really hard to even stick anything in them. I do feel for um, for the individual, the Cushings, who do have a huge structure right next to them, and there's no blocking that one. Or, I mean, I'm assuming that structure meets the setback requirements, because it's a pretty big structure right there near their property line. But we, if you recall, we had a Alpine City sign sitting on the water district's easement, and we had to move it. Even though we could easily move it if they had a water line issue, they wouldn't allow it. We had to move it too. So there is reason for those setbacks, and a need to make sure that we don't infringe upon that. But I do know that if we drove around the whole city, we would see many violations of all sorts of different codes. That's why 2 years ago, we hired an enforcement officer to start trying to enforce the codes, because we received more complaints from people saying, why don't you enforce the law that you guys have created? And I get that complaint almost more than any other complaint is, what are you guys doing? You need to enforce something. So we are in a tough spot. We sit here in a seat that, Ryan and Don, that is just a difficult seat to sit in, because laws are created, and then are we supposed to look the other way? I do appreciate the suggestions of how to resolve the problem that exists on these three people. But I too, I think, like the rest of the council, don't feel like it's an adjustment on a building that's that close to the property line. An adjustment to the height is the approach. And I think that's what the Planning Commission, most of them felt like that was a hard deal. And I don't know if they just, I listened to all of their meetings too, but they couldn't come to a good solution to say, yeah, raising the height would be okay. They had a hard time at this, just like we're having a hard time. The questions that have been asked are legitimate questions. And Jason, my question was exactly the same as yours. If there is a way to permit an exception, but there isn't. So because I wouldn't mind looking at some of them case by case and doing an exception, but we don't have a way to do that either. It's like, I'm ready to make a motion to make an exception, but I can't, because our hands are tied by our ordinance that doesn't allow us to on this situation. There are other ordinances that we can make exceptions to, but not this one.
Well, and I think many of the points that you've made and others have made, people, they build and purchase homes based on certain expectations. And one of those expectations is that we have ordinances that are enforceable and that they are enforced. And, you may have neighbors in one situation like the one we're looking at tonight, where most people don't mind and they're willing to live with an exception or something that's in violation of the code. But it's hard to pick and choose what you're going to enforce. You really can't do that without becoming subject to criticism, and we've got to make sure that if we're going to have an ordinance that it's enforceable and that it's clearly identifiable. In this case, it's an easy thing to do to build a shed or to build a fence or anything else that you don't think is consequential without really digging into it before you do so to make sure you're in compliance. The challenge is once you do that and you're out of compliance, then what? And it's hard to tell somebody to tear down a structure. I'm not sure there's any fine that can be apply that would compensate neighbors for who may be negatively impacted. And so, we are in a position where we've got to figure out, and I shouldn't say that, we have figured out what we're willing to live with in the city of Alpine. We've created an ordinance around it. And so the expectation would be that people comply with the ordinance. I don't know if I've said anything that that changes anything, but it makes it a difficult situation when you have somebody that has gone out of compliance, even if it's unknowingly. There are people who are impacted by it.
Mayor, if I may, I was going to make one comment. I've heard several of the council members talk about, well, I wish we had another option. And I think it would be important to point those that in the future are looking to have some sort of exception here, that there is variances that are granted within the city through the appropriate mechanisms. You have to ask for a variance on certain setbacks. If you want a variance for example, to build your shed closer to a fence or to get out of a setback, there is an opportunity to ask for a variance. Now, there are 5 requirements under Utah law that you have to meet, and those are spelled out in our ordinance. But people that have unique lots in those situations, they do have an opportunity to ask for a variance before they begin building a shed of a specific height or setback. So forth.
But that has to be accomplished prior to construction. Is that right, Hiram?
That is one of the 5 criteria set by state statute, is that it can't be self-inflicted. The hardship that is created by the setback or whatever the ordinance may be on the lot, it can't be self-inflicted. So in terms of people going forward that might have unique lots or some sort of hardship on their lot that requires them to put a shed of bigger size or closer to a setback, there is an opportunity to Austin pulled up the code there. There is an opportunity to ask a hearing officer for a variance if you meet those 5 criteria.
Okay. Thank you. And Austin, thanks for putting that up in front of everybody so we can read it. I see that Jane has joined us, Jane Greiner, who is the chair of our planning commission. Jane, I think you can see where we are on the agenda.
Yeah, my apologies. I forgot that you guys started an hour earlier and I joined right at 7. So I probably missed anything I needed to hear.
Well, we're in the middle of discussing the shed ordinance, and we didn't have anybody who had attended. We've listened in on the planning meeting, but you were personally there conducting that meeting. Do you have any thoughts that you might want to offer on this issue?
No, I think, we looked at a lot of different options. We looked at, some of the options in other cities. When we saw the height of a 10-foot shed, it was concluded that was the purpose of that. And we looked at different sight lines like you guys did as far as the different angles. Marla had made a suggestion that we may want to even consider, instead of having 2 ordinances that people have to decide which one, that there's just one that says, within this many feet of the property line, the shed could be X high. And so that it would maintain that sight line if we did anything. And so that was just something we thought, well, we could consider that. But also we ran into a little bit of a bigger problem with the sheds, which is that all the new neighborhoods have a 5-foot utility easement on the sides and I think 10 foot on the back. And those are non-negotiable, like you can't put a structure over them. And so all the sheds we're looking at are also on the utility easement.
Yeah.
And so that was another concern. But the general consensus was they felt like that the current ordinance, the intent of it was correct. And that, if we wanted to do anything, it wouldn't necessarily change that, but combine the 2 ordinances into one that might be a little easier for people to understand and for Marla to administer.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. And Austin, if I heard you correctly, a few minutes ago, you said that we do allow flat work on an easement or on a right of way, but not on. We don't allow a structure to go over that.
That's correct. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So flat work like maybe a basketball court or a driveway,
Right.
but not,
Yeah.
not a shed or a.
Yeah, and there was also the issue of if they had electrical or plumbing in them. And if they have electrical in them, then they definitely require a building permit. Even if they're the size, the smaller size, anything with electrical or plumbing has to have a building permit
Okay.
and a firewall.
Okay. Thank you, Jane.
I would say this, Mayor.
Yes.
I mean, maybe we should look a little more closely in a couple of these things, like with the 5-foot easement for these new subdivisions, and what Austin said, that there's some variance, which I have a hard time with that, with what is allowed to be put on there and movable and what isn't. I think maybe we should look a little deeper into what that means to be movable, allow people to put stuff closer than 5 foot on their property line. I think that I would be open to looking at that, to allow people to maximize the space they have, and the city could be happy, and the homeowner could be happy as well. Maybe we can add that as a discussion item.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point there, because you know, I've had a couple utility companies come out, right, and this would be very rare. You know, like the only thing that would come in along one side of my property would be, say, phone and internet. But since they have an easement on both sides, and they don't seem to really care, by the way, they go outside of that 5 foot, you know, wherever they want, right? And I mean, they go in and out and whatever is easiest, but they'll go into the other lot. And so what I wonder is, you know, is it practical to have, you know, 1 or 2 feet to put in a phone line, which, you know, they you know, from what I see, they're just fine almost to just lay on the ground, right? Or just trench in a little bit. You know, so I think that's a question, or what really happens, right? If they have to come in, does the homeowner have to, you know, dig up the concrete if it's there, and that's their cost and responsibility? You know, is that the sort of the extent of it? They can do it, but they're liable, or, you know, it's just, we don't allow it ever because they are taking a risk to themselves in the future of having that torn out. So.
Okay. All right.
Can I bring up one issue? I'm sorry. This is Rebecca Strong. I haven't spoken before now, but I guess I'm misunderstanding. Is a 10-foot shed allowed on that 5-foot easement or no?
No.
Not.
The setback is 12 feet, Austin, or 10 feet?
So the setback is 10 feet on the side.
No structures are allowed on the easement according to our ordinance right now.
Right. Uh-huh.
But if you meet all the exceptions and one of those being 10 feet, then it is allowed on that easement?
So you're getting confused. There's 2 different things that we're talking about here. We're talking about an easement and we're talking about a setback. And so they're 2 different things. The setback requirement is 10 feet. However, inside that setback, there is an easement for utilities,
Okay.
which is 5 feet.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And because of that, if you build 10 feet, you're well outside of the easement, which protects the easement owner.
That makes sense.
Okay, a lot of discussion. Are any of the council members ready with a motion?
Mayor, I just had a quick follow-up on Hiram's discussion on variance. When he said it can't be self-inflicted, does that mean then that you basically need to have the variance before it goes in? Is that what the term self-inflicted means in this case?
Yes.
Generally, that's how it's interpreted, yes.
All right, I see.
Or another way to look at this, how I've always looked at it, Greg, this is Shane. I mean, if that shed could physically fit on that property somewhere and meet the setbacks, but they want to put it somewhere else, that would be self-imposed in my experience. For example, we have someone right now that's applied for a variance to build a swimming pool and a pool house, just kind of a little equipment shed. Well, it doesn't meet our ordinance. They don't want to take some trees out to make it meet the ordinance. I'm not the hearing officer, but they could make it work and meet our ordinance if they wanted to, but that's not where they want to put that building. So that would be a self-imposed issue there.
So in relation to these sheds that are not in compliance, are there two problems with them? They're sitting on a utility easement and they're taller than they're supposed to be?
In order to put them inside the setback, yes, they have those two requirements. And then there's a third one, which we're not sure of because no inspection was done. We don't know if they're constructed out of a 1 hour fire material. So that's kind of a question mark on that aspect as well. So really there's kind of 3 items out of the 6 criteria that are kind of questionable.
Okay, so because I think it was framed that the only non-compliance was the height, but there's actually potentially 3 non-compliant items with the shed, correct?
Correct, potentially.
So I do have this one question though that I think Planning Commission wrestled with a little bit as well, is that what about all the other ones that are out of compliance or around the city? You know, are they just not noticed? You know, is this, you know, how do we deal with that? Is that just, you know, what the code compliance officer observes and then follows up on it? I just think that might be a concern, is because I think it's fairly prevalent where people might have done that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Greg. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, a lot of our enforcement has been complaint driven. So we don't run around and look for non-compliance as much as we do entertaining complaints and investigating those complaints. So that's really not an answer to your question, but it is just a matter of circumstance that we don't have the I guess the manpower to go around and enforce every ordinance on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and along with that, and Greg, to a point you made earlier, as far as trying to notify people in advance, every set of house plans that comes through for a building permit, we have a very large red stamp that we stamp on those plans that says for any accessory buildings, retaining walls, pools, all those different things, they all require a separate permit. And one of the reasons for that, you could get a site plan that comes in that has all of those, and maybe part of those are in kind of a future phase and they don't have plans. And so it gets very confusing. And so we've required a separate set of plans for each one of those. And that's our way of kind of notifying people in advance. And even with that, Ted spends a tremendous amount of time dealing with retaining walls that were built without permits, the don't meet our ordinance, and these buildings and other fences and similar things. So we try, but no matter what you do, you're not going to catch all of them. But I think Ted has over 600 cases. Is that the number you recall, Austin?
Yeah, yep. He has
that he's either worked or is working. So there's a lot.
Yeah, Ted has been.
Yeah, and our code enforcement program is, I mean, Ted's been with us for, I think it's a couple years now. And so it's a new program. And the purpose behind the program, as the mayor stated earlier, is we're trying to enforce our code. But that being said, you know, we're not out to go out there and just punish people and look for someone that we can, you know, that we can give them a hard time. It's really, we're really looking for compliance. And so compliance versus punishment, we're not trying to punish you, but we're just trying to get compliance to the city's ordinances.
Can I ask one more question and follow up to maybe what Gordon said?
Yep.
So now we have some of these buildings that they're beautiful. They've done a really nice, you know, shed, you know, but it looks great. You know, it's a custom one. What's the end result? Do they have to tear it down? Is that what, you know, obviously they can whatever, bring it to the next level to try to get approval, but if they get, is that the goal, to tear it down as far as the city?
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
guess
application.
I was having the same thought, Jason. And I guess in some cases, and maybe not all cases, you could potentially lower the pitch of the roof or rebuild the top part of it to bring it more into compliance. But I'm not sure that how realistic that is.
Because I
We've
hate,
had
Awesome. Oh, sorry, Jason.
I hate creating and modifying ordinances up to meet someone who hasn't met the ordinance. It's just a very dysfunctional way to do it.
Yeah.
But as a good neighbor to the city, I would just think, is there some way that we don't have them tear down a beautiful, I don't know, I'm just trying to think that way a little bit. Is
Well,
there
they
some
can move them. They can move them.
So there, Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's already one in the area that has either moved or is in the process of moving his shed to comply.
Yeah, there's one on that same street that he's actually he's moved it, so to be in compliance. And then we've had another one, a separate case that happened a few months ago where someone actually changed the pitch of the roof to be in compliance. So those are some examples of things that have been done recently.
How far out of compliance are these? Maybe that was presented early on, but what are we looking at on these structures that we're talking about?
Our shed is 14 inches off 10 feet.
And it's 14 inches off of 10 feet and it's 12 and a half feet tall. So to move it 14 inches just
Is what it would be.
doesn't feel in the spirit of this.
We're off by 1 foot 4 inches in height.
Okay, so, okay.
Excuse me, can I ask who said the 14 inches? Because I didn't see that.
Sorry, we're the Strongs.
Okay, thank you.
Help me understand the 14 inches. 14 inches from the property line, or
Yes, 14 inches from the property line. So
from
we're
the 5 feet? Because isn't there a 5 foot easement then?
We're 8 feet 8 inches from the property line. Or 8 feet 10 inches from the property line.
Okay.
And are these structures near one another? I mean, how close do they cluster?
We're all neighbors, but they're not next to each other.
Okay. And
So on the mayor,
are you impact each other, or are you impacting someone else who's not represented here?
So ours, like Greg said, he can see all of ours out of his back and they're not really obstructing. We have verbal statements from all of our surrounding lots that they do not care about our shed in essence and that it doesn't obstruct any views whatsoever. We sit below the lots behind us and the lots to the side of us, to the one side of us can't see our shed at all. So there's no obstruction whatsoever from our shed personally. And our shed is 11 feet, 3 inches tall actually. So we're 15 inches above what's allowed.
So 15 inches in height and about 16 inches off the easement for the.
Oh no, the Strongs are that close to the easement. We're 3 feet off the fence.
Okay.
So we would need to drag ours off that 5 foot easement, but we can't drag ours 15 feet or it hits our garage. We're within that 12 foot that it needs to be away from our home if we drag it 15 feet.
Okay.
So we would have to tear it down based on the discussion tonight.
Okay.
One of you guys had your shed a foot on the property line.
Well, just to clarify, the 12 feet is only if you're trying to put it inside the setback. That requirement to be away from a home, from your home. Otherwise, the setback for an accessory structure from a home is 5 feet.
Okay.
5 feet basic public easement or 5 feet in general?
That's the setback between the accessory structure and the home requirement. So if they had to move it in closer to the middle of their property, closer to their home, there would still be a setback. They would have to deal with the setback in between the home and the structure.
Which is 5 feet, not 12.
Not 12, yeah, the 12, yeah, that's in order to qualify for the exception to put your structure in the easement, you have to be at least 12 feet from any dwelling, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay. This is a tough one. Would anybody like to produce a motion?
Can I ask one more question, Mayor? I apologize.
Yes, please, Jason.
I don't like the idea of changing the entire ordinance for 4 or 5 people who didn't know about the ordinance and build something they thought was in compliance and wasn't. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Have we ever, and maybe this is more towards Shane, this sounds weird, but made a motion to grandfather in everything up to a certain point, and this sounds weird, but just grandfather in everything to a certain point, and then do a better job explaining to the city what it is. And I don't know, I'm just trying to think to myself, with all the problems that were pointed out, would that even be an option to the city to do that? Maybe that's illegal.
But Jason, I mean, Shane mentioned that when anyone submits a plan, the city has full disclosure on any accessory buildings, swimming pools, anything that they're going to install that they need to go through the city. If they knew that they didn't need a permit for the city, yet they didn't check to see what the height restrictions are or whether they could build on an easement, to me, it just seems a little.
But that's only for structures that are less than 200 square feet. If there's 200 square feet, they don't have to let the city know and don't have to get a building permit. I think that's what a lot of these are.
Right, but if you know that much, you're not going to check into what other restrictions are going to be there for the 200 square feet.
I think I wouldn't know some of those things, to be honest with you. About the materials that you can use that have to be fireproofed or plumbing and electric. I mean, say you wanted to put a light on the front of your shed. There's some things that I wouldn't know about, and I've been on the planning commission and city council for 14 years. So I would say that there are some things that are a little unknown, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I just don't know how to remedy being in the utility easement. And when you already have other people meeting the requirement to move out of the easement, how can you say, well, these people don't have to move their building out of the easement, even though other people have already started meeting the requirement to vacate the easement?
So what was the year that this ordinance was drafted? Do we have a date for that?
Austin?
Let me see if I can get that for you here real quick.
Carla, to my knowledge, this hasn't changed in over 20 years.
Okay.
And it's one of those deals, to Jason's point, of where do you draw the line? I mean, most people don't know the codes for plumbing or electrical or framing or different things in a house. So, the 200 square feet thing, that is not, and Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, that's not in our ordinance. It's actually a building code thing.
Yeah, we actually don't outline that in our ordinance.
Will you find the 200 square feet?
All right, Hiram, what kind of a motion do we need here? Because, we're looking at, a current violation of the code and a proposal to change the code. So I think unless you read this differently, we need a motion on whether or not we're going to entertain a change in the ordinance itself. And I think that the enforcement of any violations at this point are a different matter. Hiram, you're muted.
Yes, sorry, I apologize. I was on mute. Yes, that's correct. I don't think, basically it was just At this point, we are going to be reviewing the proposed ordinance at this time. As my understanding, and Austin, you can chime in as well, is this would go back to the Planning Commission again. Is that right, Austin? If the council was to approve recommending this to go forward to the Planning Commission for their writing of any sort of amended ordinance. At this point, if the council votes otherwise, then we would just be done.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think we're voting now. The motion needs to be made whether or not we choose to pursue a change in the ordinance or not. If the
Correct.
motion is not, and that motion passes, then it dies here.
Correct, that's right.
If we want to send it back, we do so with the instruction to the commission that we want something reevaluated.
Yes, that's correct.
And so I think it's important to draw the distinction between that motion and any other question on what would be done for current violations to the current ordinance.
Yes, that's right. Before the council right now is the consideration of whether they want to consider this further, whether they want to consider amendments to this specific ordinance and have it sent to the Planning Commission or not.
Okay, so
not the violation of this ordinance as it stands.
So to that point, is there a council member with a motion on that point alone?
But maybe I want to do what we can to figure this out and help in the best way we can. Just like Jason, I appreciate how Jason's moving his thoughts and how he's moving through this. Maybe I could start the process by making this motion that we I'm pulling it together here. That we currently waive the penalties that these families are concerned that they're going to be having to pay because they're in violation of the ordinance, until we can sort out a few more of these ideas to try and help them prepare to either move their sheds or an ordinance change exists.
Okay, so before I ask for a second to that motion, I don't know that addresses what, because we shouldn't be addressing penalty phase right now, whether or not we're going to change the ordinance. Or
Mayor?
Change. Yes, Carla.
So from what I understand is, as unfortunate as the situation is for these citizens of Alpine, the only concern we have now is looking at the ordinance as it's stated, whether we agree with it or not. Irrespective of what's going on with these sheds and these structures that are on these properties. That's not what we're considering. What we're considering now is the ordinance as it's stated. Do we agree that that's what's best for Alpine? If you don't think that's best for Alpine, then you need to, either state a motion or vote accordingly. But if you feel like the ordinance as it's stated now, that that's the best thing for Alpine and its general citizens, irregardless of enforcing it, whatever it may be, that's what we need to base our decision on. That's all that's on the table right now.
I agree, yes.
And to further that point, I mean, we can look at the agenda itself. If we're going to get into discussing penalties and the enforcement of specific cases and things like that, we need to be placing them on the agenda as a discussion item. This, as we have it now here on the agenda, all it is this proposed change to an amendment.
I apologize. I understand that. I will retract that motion then.
Okay.
I just know, I'm sure they're just stressed about a deadline and everything else. I feel bad for them.
No, I totally agree with you, Lon.
And I do too. I think that's what I'd like that separate the issue, because even if we decide to go back with and reevaluate the ordinance, I don't know that puts them in a better position. I might buy them a little bit of time, but I think we can do that outside the potential motion. Again, I think we need to look exclusively at whether or not we change the ordinance and send it back to the planning commission, or if we want the way they are, and then let the chip fall afterward.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
And I've actually come full circle on this, so I'm going to make the motion, see where it goes. But I make a motion that we send back to Planning Commission our accessory structure ordinance and ask them to come up with a new ordinance or modification to the ordinance, I should say, that allows for these accessory apartments to be on the easement if they are movable, and attaching parameters to what movable is defined as well as, yep. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, and I think this is where what I can do is I can push it back to Planning Commission and say we'd like to modify our ordinance up to work with neighbors right now. And part of that ordinance is reevaluating the height. Maybe 10 foot isn't what it has to be. To Carla's point, what's best for the city? Is 10 foot really best for the city? Let's analyze that. And we have a thing where they can't be on the easement. I don't think that should be a hard and fast thing if the building is movable. And we just need to define what movable is, to Austin's point.
And Jason, I'm sorry if I misheard, but just for the clarification on the record, that accessory apartment, but accessory building.
I think Shane has his microphone on. There's some feedback there.
Hey, Mayor, are you listening? Are you talking on one device and have another device that you're using?
No, I'm listening to the internet.
We're sure getting a lot of feedback. Every time you're talking, though, you break up and we're hearing double talk.
Okay, sorry about that. Is it any better right now?
It's perfectly clear for me.
Yeah, I've only had one device on the whole time.
Okay, well, I can hear you right now. But anyway, I understand what Jason's saying there.
I'm going to make the motion again, if that's okay.
Please do.
I make a motion that we send this back to Planning Commission, instructing them to do two things. One, relook at the height allowed for these accessory buildings off the property line and see if a higher height up to 12.5 would be acceptable in our city. And two, determine what is allowed on the easement, 5-foot easement setback of these new subdivisions in regards to it being a movable structure, and allowing a movable structure to sit on that easement.
Okay. Did you get that motion, Bonnie?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I will listen to it again, but there was a lot of feedback between you and Jason, so I may just type it to Jason and just make sure.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second, Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason Thielen and a second by Greg Gordon. Is there any further discussion on the motion or question on the motion?
The only question I have, this is Jessica, is that what the Planning Commission just did and made a recommendation on, or is this a different action that we're requesting?
To me, it looked like, and Jane, you can probably better speak, or someone else, but it looked to me that they looked at the height pretty carefully. I don't think there was much discussion. In fact, there was quite a bit of question on the utility easement use and how that is maybe commonly, used in some cases, but I don't think they did look at that or that new question aspect of it.
Yeah, the only thing that was brought before us was a proposed idea of changing the height. It was a request to change the ordinance to have a 13-foot height. That was the only thing that was brought before us. And so And that's why I had a negative vote on the motion, is I thought that we should look at the whole thing in a completely different way.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially on these easements where there's 5 foot on all the way around these new properties. And then you move to the next lot and there's a 5 foot all the way around. And the utilities, to Greg's point, typically won't be going in at least one of those sides or the other. And we need to determine how to circumvent, like Jason had made the point of reducing their buildable area or their usable area by circling them all the way around with an easement that they can't do anything on. So I like Jason's motion to try and sort that one out as well.
Okay, then with that, let's take a vote on that motion. Do you feel like any clarification needs to be made, Bonnie? Do you need anything before we move forward?
No, I've got it. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion to send it back to the Planning Commission, say aye. Lon Lott?
Aye.
Jessica Smith?
Aye.
Jason Thielen?
Yes.
Carla Merrill?
Nay.
Greg Gordon?
Aye.
Okay, so we have 4 ayes and a nay. The motion does pass by majority vote. To the Binghams and the Strongs, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your circumstances, and let's see how this plays out. Thank you for joining the meeting.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes. Moving on to the next agenda item, Shane, would you like to introduce the conservation plan and kind of explain why we're going into a public hearing?
Yes, I will. I did send you an email a few minutes ago because I realized that when I picked the water conservation plan to go in the packet, I grabbed the previously adopted version of that ordinance instead of the new one. So I apologize for that. You have the new one on your email. It basically, it's a similar document. It goes into more detail. The state with drought and population growth and all those things, they've gotten more critical on these plans. So this is the first time that they've actually had us prepare a plan. We had to submit it by, I think, August 15th. And then they reviewed it. They didn't actually get it back to us until after our last city council meeting in December. So we were supposed to have this adopted by the end of the year, but with their review time frame, that was not possible. Anyway, so we have this public hearing scheduled. We have the water conservation plan here in front of us on the screen. And then whatever, after we have the public hearing, however the council would like to handle that, if you need time to review it, that's great. And we can have it on the next agenda, or if you're comfortable, we could adopt it tonight.
And Shane, I had a question. So the one that was previously in the packet, it was obviously fairly outdated because it was like the 2004. Does the new one basically capture all of those updates? Because one of my questions was, when and at what point do we need to do kind of a full update versus minor updates?
So it's actually specified in state code. I believe it's every 5 years that we have to do this. If a city is trying to get state funding, say for a water project or something like that, and they don't have a plan, that they won't work with them on that funding. We're not currently in that situation where we're requesting funding, but if you don't have a plan in place, they put your name in the newspaper and try to shame you into getting a plan prepared. This plan is quite different from the one that's actually in the packet, because back then we did not have pressure irrigation meters. There were less stringent water reporting requirements from the state. There's been a big push the last probably 3 years on really taking a very close look at water consumption and where all the water's going and reporting all that every year. And so this plan addresses all of those things and all the changes and more stringent requirements in state law.
So this is the 5-year major update, right?
It is, yes. Ours was due. It was due to be updated in 2020. Mm-hmm. So
I'm not ready to vote on this as I haven't read through it all. So I prefer just to push till next week if we could look at it.
yeah, and maybe, and I think that's great, Jason. If we could just have the public hearing, since we've advertised it, scheduled it. I realize it's a little bit unfair that it wasn't in the packet, or if someone wanted to review that, but they would have that opportunity in 2 weeks as well. But if we could just have the public hearing to meet that part of the requirement, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we need to have the public hearing and then we can move as needed. All right. So with that introduction, I will open the public hearing. Austin, do we have, can you please track if we have any comments?
I'm going to guess no.
I don't know, Carla, there might be an audience for this out there.
No.
They're rolling in right now, just rolling in one after another. Just no, there's actually nothing. So
Let's at least a minute for anybody to jump on if they do have a comment. And I'll, if any council members want to comment in the meantime, you're free to do so.
Just that I'm with Jason. I'd rather look at the new plan.
Yeah,
before
I agree.
we move forward.
Okay. Anything, Jason? Or sorry, Austin?
Nope, nothing.
All right, then we'll wrap up the public hearing. My pen is my gavel. Okay, just got to check the agenda here.
Next item should be the consolidated fee schedule, Mayor.
Thank you. It's taken me a minute to scroll through my phone. Okay.
Are
Shane,
we going to make a motion on that?
do you want to make?
Do we need to?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. We do need to make a motion to table. Would you like to do so, Jessica?
Yeah, that was Bonnie, but I will make a motion to table the water conservation report to be reviewed at next city council meeting.
Okay, we have a motion by Jessica. Would somebody like to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Lon. Motion to table by Jessica Smuin, seconded by Lon Lott. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Jason Thielen.
Aye.
Lon Lott.
Aye.
Carla Merrill.
Aye.
Jessica Smuin.
Aye.
And Greg Gordon.
Aye.
Motion to table passes. Thank you. I usually have pretty good voice recognition skills, but sorry, Bonnie. Okay.
Okay, do you
All
want
right.
me to just go over the changes to the consolidated fee schedule, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the county recorder's office increased their recording fees for subdivision. It's actually for any document. So it's actually, this is for the subdivision plat. So it's $50 per sheet and $2 per lot instead of the $30 and $1 previously. So that's the first update. The second, when we adopted our kind of updated our construction standards and specs and everything, we included in there on new subdivisions, that the developer needs to provide money for a preservation coat, like the seal coats that we put on, like the HA5 product or Onyx or one of those. And so we took just kind of an average price on that of 25 cents per square foot and wanted to include that on there so that it would be on our schedule. The next change is on impact fees, and this is not our fee. This is Timpanogos Special Service District's sewer impact fee. They're raising that from 1708 to 1785 and 55 cents. I think that takes place, it goes into effect in February, if I remember right. And then a couple of things on the cemetery. Currently, we're not in a position to sell plots to non-residents just because of limitations on numbers of available plots. And so to take away what looks like those plots are available to a non-resident, we could take that out. We could leave it in case you decide in the future when we get additional plots to be able to sell those to non-residents. And then similarly, I think, yeah, go ahead.
We still do opening and closings for non-residents that already have a plot.
Yes.
But we just don't sell them to non-residents that don't already have plots.
That's correct. And that's the thought that came to me on the next one with burial of ashes for a non-resident. We could have a non-resident that receives a plot from someone that already owns one, or they could own one and be a non-resident now. So I think that one needs to stay in there. Or just take it out and put burial of ashes, period. No resident or non-resident. And then the last one is no holiday burials. That's in there, or burials after 2 p.m. We ran into a couple of situations where some of these funerals have arrived very late, and if it's during the week, we're not paying overtime at that time normally. Let me back up. The rate that they're paying does not account for overtime that we would need to pay someone to be here after the workday. And so we suggest having this 2 p.m. Limitation in this schedule. And those are the changes that are proposed at this time. Any questions on those?
And Shane, burials after 2 p.m. are quite rare anyway today, aren't they?
They are, but we have had some instances where I don't remember the specifics. Bonnie might, but we had one that was ended up being kind of a bad
We've
situation.
had several where they haven't left. They don't leave. If that makes any sense. We've
They
had
just
them
stay
stay till 5.
So we don't take care of replacing everything in the hole until everyone is left. And so if they just linger, the guys just have to sit there and wait.
Well, Shane, when I buried my parents, they had a clause in theirs that if you did not leave the cemetery by a certain time, you had to pay a fee that was X amount, and it motivated everyone to leave.
Yeah, and that's that definitely could be something to consider.
And funerals have become pretty condensed now with the limitations and people that can come, but that's going to go away hopefully in the near future. And as it does, and funerals get back to their normal size and increase delays, then it could be more of an issue as well in the future.
And I may not, realize all the sensitivities at funerals. I was at one in Logan City Cemetery and lingering there, and they just went ahead and started, put the dirt back and so maybe, I don't know if that's an idea as well, as they can just go ahead.
No, I can guarantee you, Greg, that's not a good idea, because We just recently had some issues on that one where it was not a good idea.
Yeah, people don't want to be interrupted. Any more discussion on?
Yeah, so back to the fact that we're taking out certain things, and maybe if we do have a rate that motivates people to leave, somehow we can enforce it. Otherwise, we can't. We can only say that. We can only say that you're late, you're leaving late. Please leave, right? I mean, Shane, you can put this 2 p.m. thing, but there's still going to be people who linger longer.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we could just arbitrarily come up with a rate, or we could adopt this ordinance, leave that in there, and then come back, or sorry, this resolution, do a little bit of research with some other cemeteries or cities and look at similar policies and then bring that back. With this fee schedule, we don't have to have a public hearing or anything like that. We just adopt it by resolution. So it could be, on any
Shane?
agenda. Yes.
Shane, maybe we could even put something just on the burial report that they fill out, that they sign. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear what you're saying though, Shane. I'm ready to move forward if you're ready, Mayor.
Yes, please.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve resolution number R2021-01 with the following change on page 9, line 5, cremation, that it be stated as burial of ashes only.
Okay.
And that would clean everything up and include non-resident or resident alike.
Okay, thank you for the motion, Lon. Do we have a second to the motion? Is there anyone who'd like to make a second to that motion?
I would, but I have a question, or I can't do a question yet, right? There has to be a second before we discuss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And you can second it without agreeing with it if you want to.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So we have a motion by Lon, seconded by Jason. Okay, Carla?
Okay, so from what I understand, we want to take out the non-resident portion of it, but Lon, you just want to say ashes, whether it's resident or non-resident, is that correct?
That's correct, because we do have people who may have already a burial plot that may want their ashes buried that might not be a resident of Alpine, and their rate is the same anyway, the $500. And so what's the difference between a resident and non-resident who already owns a burial plot that's having buried ashes?
Yeah, no, you're right.
And the same fee.
Mm-hmm. And the same fee.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions on the motion? Hearing none, I will move to a vote. All in favor of the motion, Carla Merrill?
Aye.
Jessica Smuen?
Aye.
Greg Gordon?
Aye.
Lon Lott?
Aye.
Jason Thielen?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. The next line item on our agenda is regarding a 1% pay increase for the Lone Peak Safety District. And many of you will remember back when we started this fiscal year, there was a lot of concern about what impact the COVID would have on our ability to collect sales tax revenue and other revenues that help support pay increases. We had approved of a 3% pay increase, but withheld 1% of that, hoping to get a better better idea of what we can afford later on. We are looking pretty good in spite of the epidemic, the pandemic. The city's revenues have maintained fairly good high levels, and we are in a position to amend this and create and give back that 1%. We did vote on this in our Lone Peak Safety District meeting on last Wednesday, and there was a unanimous decision to approve pending the approval of Alpine once we had a chance to vote on a budget adjustment to do so. Highland City has already passed it. Their meeting is on the other Tuesday, so they had a chance to vote before we had that meeting at the district. So now, Shane, I'm sorry, I may have missed something there. Do you want to add to that explanation at all? Are you there, Shane?
Sorry, I was muted. It was discussed originally in the budget process 3%, but the approved budget was actually 2% for Lone Peak and 2% for city employees when all the dust settled and the budgets were approved. So this is here. Highland went ahead and approved this. They had their public hearing. They amended their budget. If the council wants to move forward with this, we would schedule a public hearing, bring this back to the next meeting. We didn't have enough time to have a public hearing at this meeting, but thought before we go to the expense of advertising, we'll bring it here. If the council's in favor, we'll get the public hearing set for the next meeting, and then this to amend our budget to include this, about $12,000. And then I put in here the same thing for the city employees. It works out to be about $12,145. I looked at our budget today because of some positions that were open and some things like that. I don't think we'd even have to increase our city budget to include that 1%. But wanted to bring that before the council as well. As the mayor said, the tax revenues and everything have been just fantastic. Our last month was actually, we were 28% higher than we were for the same month last year. And cumulative for the budget year, we're over 17% above last year. So revenues are holding really strong for our city. So if you'd like to move forward with that, we will put the steps in motion to make it happen for the next meeting. So as the mayor said, the district approved this subject to the Alpine City Council approving the funds to fund this increase.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that is, we've discussed this in the past. There is a competitive element to the compensation for our police and fire. Things have not changed. Cities are still looking to recruit, and we are trying to remain as competitive as we can in recruiting and maintaining quality officers and firefighters. So I think this is part of it. In my own opinion, this is a no-brainer to move forward with. Any comments by council before we move forward and give a recommendation?
I'll move to schedule a public hearing for February 9th to consider amending the budget to include a 1% increase for Lone Peak Public Safety District and city staff.
Thank you, Jason. Do you have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Carla. So we have a motion to support and move forward with the hearing made by Jason Thielen, seconded by Carla Merrill. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, we'll move forward with a vote. Carla Merrill?
Aye.
Greg Gordon?
Aye.
Lon Lott?
Aye.
Jessica Smuin?
Aye.
Jason Thielen?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. Motion passes. So we will move forward and notice for the public hearing, and that'll be on, what was the date?
I think it's February 9th.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. And along with that, since we will be doing kind of a mid-year budget amendment, I think we'll we'll use that budget amendment to clean up some things related to the CARES Act funds and get things taken care of there at the same time.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. Staff reports. Chief Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just was trying to get off of mute there. Sorry about that. No, I don't have anything additional other than we have, in just kind of concert with the last discussion, we have one of our fire captains is elected to take another job with a competing or neighboring department, and we've had several other individuals testing. I think some of that is just related to the competitive nature that we're seeing out there. And so I appreciate the support as far as the financial impact to our organization.
Thank you, Reed. That's that's something that I think we're going to be dealing with for quite some time. I know it's not all monetary in nature. A lot of it's cultural and opportunity, but I think we've got to do everything we can to shore up our department and make sure that we're getting the best talent available.
Yeah, the other challenge that we're finding is about half of our staffing comes from the part-time pool, and we currently are just not being able to. The pool, I believe, out there is just non-existent, so to speak, and so we're not filling the part-time pool back up, and we've had individuals that have left for a variety of different reasons. A lot of them just they've received a promotion with their full-time job or different opportunities that they've had, and so as we continue to look at this from a long-term perspective, I think at some point we need to address a transition over a period of years from needing to rely on full-time staffing versus a hybrid model of full-time and part-time. And that's not something that is going to have to happen overnight, but it's certainly a flag and a concern for us right now because our numbers are down to where it makes it difficult to keep us staffed at 8 on a daily basis.
Yeah. Good insight. Thank you, Reed. Anything else? Oh, you muted, so I'm assuming no.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Chief William, do you have anything for us?
Just a couple of things. Thank you for giving me opportunities to speak for just a minute. I do echo what Chief Thompson has discussed, and it is a competitive market out there, and it's nice for us to be able to stay as competitive as we can. I will knock on wood right now, and I say we've been fully staffed since September, and it took us 4 years to get to that point. We had a rotation of officers in and out, but we've been fully staffed, and we have great officers and staff that are currently with us. I wanted to give you just a real quick report on our enforcement efforts at Lambert Park. Over the last week, we've given some extra effort and focused on Lambert Park and individuals that were up there in motorized vehicles or otherwise violating the park's allowance to be in there. We have issued, to my knowledge, and I have not been in the office for a couple of weeks. I've been quarantined. I'm hoping to be back next week. But to my knowledge, we've probably issued at least a half a dozen or more citations and referred individuals to court. One thing that we discovered quite quickly was that when there's construction on Grove Drive, the construction workers that are working up above that area in the Box Elder area, as well as the now in those areas up there, we're finding that when they're looking for alternate routes to get up there, when they find that the road is closed down or under construction, it's rerouting them through Lambert Park. And so their entrance is that gate there at Moyle Drive, and then to travel north through the park to access the areas above that. So hopefully the message has got out to those individuals that have been doing that, and the companies and construction workers that have been traveling through the park, that's not allowable, and they're either going to have to wait for the construction or they'll have to find other ways around. So that was one of the big challenges to begin with, but I think we remedied that for the most part. our plan going forward, we have scheduled at least through this week and a part of next week, officers to be in the park or at the entrances to the park at random times at different times during the day and in the evening. We wanted to avoid individuals knowing that the officers are going to be there between 2 and 6 on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So we've kind of just randomly chosen times of the day to be up there, times that we feel that our time will be best spent in enforcing the park there. But we have taken a zero tolerance stance. We've actually cited a few individuals that were our frequent callers for complaints in the park that were in violation of the motorized vehicle ordinance, and we just continue to move on that way. So we're planning, or the officers are keeping track of the amount of contacts and what they're observing. So we'll have a report that I'll be sending to the council once we're finished with this.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate that. Brian and I have had some conversations earlier since our last meeting, especially one concerning a couple of commercial trucks using that road. Jessica, thank you for providing the photographs of those trucks. I've had some pretty spirited conversations with management at Geneva Rock. And I think I've had 3 different people call me within the leadership group of Geneva promising that that will never happen again. But Jessica provided some pictures of a dump truck and a cement mixer heading up that road. And the ironic thing to me was that the sign that indicates it's an emergency access only, limiting it to emergency vehicles, was windshield high to the cement mixer as it passed through. So there's no way he could have missed it. To me, that's a pretty flagrant violation. And I told Geneva that I felt like they owed us at least $1,000 already because we have a picture of 2 violators. And they've been very apologetic and promised to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Pursuant to that, though, Brian, I appreciate that you're putting officers up there on a regular basis. I guess a request I would make is to make at least one of those time windows for once or twice to be early in the morning when loads like that are more typically delivered to a construction site. Because I think those guys weren't the first and only commercial violators, and I guess I'd hold them to a higher standard.
We can certainly do that. I'll make note of that, and we'll make the adjustments if necessary, if we're not already doing that.
Great. Thanks very much for your help there.
Just one thing of note on that, Mayor, up until this last fall, late last fall, when certain sections of Grove Drive were shut down, someone's connecting to the sewer or something like that, there wasn't another option. Now, I know that this road was kind of open quietly, but the connection of Elk Ridge Lane to Grove Drive through the Ridge subdivision is now open. And the contractor working on Grove Drive now has had detour signs, but they just haven't been followed by everyone. So there is an option now, which is fantastic.
Good deal. That's great. Thank you. Did you have anything that needed to be brought before the group? Bonnie, you still with us?
Sorry, I was just plugging in with my iPad. Just something that Shane and I were going to start working on was maybe some new signage in the cemetery about when we would be removing items that people have left on gravesites. That was it.
Okay. Thank you. Austin?
I have nothing tonight.
Okay, great. Hiram?
I have nothing to talk about.
Thank you. Did we lose Jane? I was going to ask her if she had anything from the Planning Commission. Looks like she's gone. From my, I'll get started on the commission communication. I've got a couple of items. First of all, as we discussed in a previous meeting, we have a settlement that we've now received, I believe. Shane, have we received all of the monies that are scheduled to be paid this year?
It's not here yet, but it's getting close.
Okay, I know the checks are ready. But there was an issue of that settlement as it pertained to the Lone Peak Fire and Safety District. The people that were in the meeting last week, we felt that it was important to give the allocation on the whole settlement to the Lone Peak Fire District. It was only an additional, Shane, was it an additional $2,500?
Roughly, yes.
So to the point of our previous conversation, I think that it's only fair to give them their share as indicated, even though part of what we're going to be receiving is not entirely out of what we would determine to be a settlement. That's kind of foggy language, I know, but I feel like we need to provide as much support to our safety people as possible. And it felt like Jason and Lon were in agreement with that.
Correct.
Okay. We talked at length about gates on Moyle Drive going into Lambert Park in our last meeting. Shane and I and Hiram, Craig had a meeting on that topic earlier this week. The discussion was not if we were going to have a gate, it's what type of gate we were going to have. And so we've asked Chief Thompson, who's also part of that meeting, to investigate the types of gates that would be most user-friendly for the fire department and police to get through in the event of an emergency. And so, Reed, I believe you're going to get back to us by the middle of next week on that. Is that right?
Yes, and Mayor, I if you look at your, you may not have seen it yet. There's an email that went out last night that kind of summarizes what we talked about yesterday and had some options there. And I listed them or prioritized them based on the least amount of impact to our response time, and because I do believe that is it's a major concern for us with the distance that we are away from the station and then our aid agency help. And so, yeah, that should be, you should have that. And if you have questions, I'd love to get back with you on it.
Very good. Thank you. So we expect to have a gate. Of course, a lot of this is going to depend on the contractor that we hire to do it and the availability of materials, but that gate will go up in the very near future. And my goal would be at the very latest, the beginning of spring, when there's a lot of bikers and hiking traffic in the park.
Mayor, in that information I provided, the first option I listed was for collapsible bollards as well, and there's some detailed information there, or at least a video for you to review as part of that. That may be I think from my perspective, may be a better option than a gate when it comes to us getting in there in an appropriate timely manner. But for you to take a look at.
Okay, sounds good, Reed. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't access my email right now because my iPad is being used for the meeting. But yeah, what we want to do is create a barrier that is adequate to keep traffic out, but also efficient enough in its removal so that it doesn't impede our fire and rescue at all. And I guess we've already talked about the other topic that I had, so that's all I've got. Greg, do you have anything for the council?
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Carla?
Nothing here.
Great. Jason?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Lon?
Nothing.
This is efficient. Jessica?
Nothing this evening.
Wow, that was a record time. Okay.
I moved to adjourn the meeting.
Hey, Mayor, one quick item.
Dang it.
Sorry, Carla. This will be very quick. At the next meeting, the mayor and I had discussed of having an anchor location here at City Hall. And then if some of you would like to participate via Zoom, you'd be able to do that. Our new system in the city council room is at about 99%. It should all be finished tomorrow, and then they're going to train us. We're working between now and next Tuesday to have some time where they train us on using this equipment. But it looks really good in there right now.
Which is really great, even beyond the COVID issue, because in the past, I don't know, some of you have joined us remotely, and it has been a chore to try to keep track of the meeting, to be heard when you have something to say, and to hear others when they're speaking. So I'm really looking forward to having this system in place, because it'll allow us to participate remotely if we're traveling or whatever, and there's an important issue on the agenda, that we can do so effectively and not have it be such a burden to try to keep up.
And broadcasting our meetings via YouTube should be much easier and work better, and the sound quality and everything should be substantially improved.
Yeah, and once we get to that point where we're convening comfortably again as a group, I don't know if it'll take a motion or any kind of official action, but I would like to start putting all of our meetings on YouTube so that people could at least watch if they wanted to from home.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to adjourn. I didn't hear a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I know I heard 5 ayes there. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.